After returning from studying abroad, I was greeted with an unexpected surprise, a future sister-in-law. She introduced herself as the soon-to-be mistress of our family, and even had the nerve to suggest she'd teach me a lesson. What she didn't know was that my brother was adopted, and I was the true heir to the Sanders family. Even my brother had to tread carefully around me. When my brother picked me up from the airport and brought me home, my parents were eagerly waiting for me. I hadn't been home in a long time due to the pandemic, and everyone was thrilled to have me back. As we caught up, laughing and sharing stories, my brother pulled a woman over and introduced her. With a hint of shyness, he said, "This is my girlfriend, Chloe, your future sister-in-law." Then, turning to her with a smile, he added, "And this is my sister, Molly Sanders, the one I've told you so much about." Chloe smiled politely and extended both hands. "You can call me Chloe." "Nice to meet you, Molly." Still caught up in the excitement of being home, I exchanged pleasantries with her but quickly turned back to continue chatting with my parents. That evening, as I cuddled up with my mom, she filled me in on the details about Chloe. Apparently, Chloe was an intern at the branch my brother managed. She seemed sweet and gentle, and my brother was completely smitten with her. It hadn't been long before he brought her home, announcing his intention to marry her. I was amused, treating it like juicy gossip. And then, well, your father and I would have preferred someone from a similar background, of course. But if he insists, there's not much we can say. If he truly loves her, we'll support him, my mom said, always the understanding one. I wasn't too concerned about my brother's choice, until the next day when I realized just how wrong I had been. Jet-lagged. I woke up late in the afternoon, went downstairs to grab something to eat, and sat down at the dining table. Just as I was about to enjoy my breakfast, I heard a voice behind me. "Sister, just waking up? Your brother's already been at the office for hours." "What's wrong with you?" I froze, confused. I turned around to see Chloe standing there. "Oh, were you talking to me?" I asked, incredulous. She rolled her eyes dramatically, her pupils almost disappearing into her skull as she descended the stairs, arms crossed. I was stunned. Wow, she's already acting like the mistress of the house, I thought. Yesterday she had seemed so sweet in front of my parents, but now with them gone her attitude had shifted completely. Who else would I be talking to? Is there someone else in the room? She shot back, her tone dripping with hostility. After my initial shock, I found it almost amusing. "I thought you were talking to someone else," I said casually. "After all, we're not that close, so don't call me sister." "My family doesn't have any older sisters," I added, before turning back to my meal. My mind raced. What kind of person had my brother fallen for? He must have been completely blinded by love. Chloe, clearly about to say something more aggressive, stopped short as we heard the front door open. Instantly, her demeanor changed. She shifted from hostile to sweet in the blink of an eye, her expression softening as if butter wouldn't melt in her mouth. "Oh, don't be upset," she said in a fragile, almost trembling voice. "If you don't want me to call you sister, I won't anymore." I was stunned. It was like watching a performance. Is she for real? Does she even realize how fake she looks? I thought. Just then my mom and brother walked in. Chloe's pitiful expression was on full display. My mom and brother, both confused, rushed over. "What's wrong? What happened?" they asked. With my brother now present, Chloe turned up the drama even more. Tears welled up in her eyes, making her look like the ultimate victim. "It's nothing," she said softly. "It's just that Molly doesn't want me to call her sister. I didn't mean to upset her. I thought it would bring us closer, but I won't do it anymore. I'm sorry." I stood there, speechless. In all my years I had never seen such a convincing manipulator. My mom, trying to smooth things over, said, "Oh, it's just a little misunderstanding. No need to be upset." My brother, still oblivious, added, "Molly's probably just jet-lagged and grumpy. Don't take it to heart." He shot me a glance, then led the seemingly heartbroken Chloe back to their room. I was so frustrated, I lost my appetite. My mom looked at me, puzzled. "What really happened?" she asked. "Nothing," I replied. "Let's just see what other tricks this girl has up her sleeve." Since I had just returned home, I was busy reconnecting with old friends and didn't have time to dwell on Chloe. But unexpectedly, one of my childhood friends, Brian White, brought her up during a casual chat. "So, how's it going with your future sister-in-law?" Brian asked, smirking. "She's quite something, isn't she?" His tone made it clear he knew something juicy. He was waiting for me to bite. "What do you know, Brian?" I asked, giving him a sidelong glance. Brian leaned in with a sly grin. "That girl was just an intern at your family's company. She hadn't even been there long before she had your brother wrapped around her finger." I scoffed. "Everyone knows that." "Tell me something I don't know," unbothered, Brian continued. "Well, did you know her goal from the start was to seduce your brother? Now she's going around bragging about being the Sanders family's future daughter-in-law." I finally turned to face him. Brian pulled out his phone and showed me several screenshots of conversations between Chloe and her friends. "William Sanders is already in my pocket. What kind of rich young master? He's putty in my hands. William brought me home to meet his parents. The Sanders house is enormous and they even have a housekeeper. I need to hold on to this tightly. William's sister is coming home soon. In families like this, the sister-in-law is always a threat. When she gets here, I'll make sure she knows her place." I stared at the messages, my anger rising. She really thought she could get away with boasting about this? I turned back to Brian. "And what's your connection to this girl?" I asked, raising an eyebrow. Brian grinned. However, I couldn't help but keep an eye on Chloe. From what I observed, her ambitions were far from small. On the surface, she seemed sweet, gentle, and innocent, someone who wasn't after anything. But in reality, she took everything she wanted. She convinced my brother to turn her internship into a full-time job, promoted her, and secured her a cushy position in the company. She went from occasionally staying over to practically moving into our house. Chloe was a master at playing the victim, knowing exactly how to win people over. In this house, everyone, except me and the housekeeper, was greeted with a smile. She charmed my parents, working hard to win over her future in-laws, and coddled my brother, fast-tracking her way to becoming the real Mrs. Sanders. But when it came to me, her future sister-in-law, she didn't even bother pretending. One night, when Mrs. Wilson brought me a late-night snack, Chloe made a fuss, demanding some too. But it was already late, and the soup had been simmering for hours. Mrs. Wilson, who was about to head to bed, hesitated. Chloe, sensing her reluctance, put her hands on her hips and slipped into her entitled young mistress persona. What? I can't get some soup when I ask? Are you the Sanders family's housekeeper or some pampered lady? Am I not allowed to give you orders now? Mrs. Wilson had no choice but to make it for her. Chloe was so domineering, yet in front of my parents, she always played the part of the gentle, submissive girl. I couldn't be bothered to join her act and never bothered hiding my disdain for her. This only made me look like the unreasonable one in comparison. I once casually asked my brother if he really intended to marry Chloe, if he even knew who she truly was. He brushed it off, saying I was being childish, and reassured me that he planned to marry her soon. He even hoped I'd get along with her. My parents, too, were growing more fond of Chloe with each passing day. She accompanied my mom on shopping trips, praising her choices and showering her with endless compliments. Naturally, my mom would often gift her something in return. It was a perfect exchange, emotional flattery for material rewards, and both were satisfied. My brother was thrilled to see the great relationship between his fiancée and his mother. I was the only one in the family who couldn't stand Chloe, and this contrast was becoming more and more obvious. I started looking like the villain in everyone's eyes. With this shift, Chloe grew more confident in her dealings with me. She didn't even try to hide her contempt when my parents weren't around. One day she casually said, "Your room is so big, Molly. After I marry your brother, can we move into this room? After all, you'll be married off soon, right? It would be such a waste to leave this space empty." It sounded like a question, but her tone made it clear she was already claiming the room. She had her eye on it from the start. I glanced at my brother, who stood nearby, and said nothing. I couldn't help but laugh in disbelief. "Is that so? You might not even marry into this family, and you're already thinking about taking my room? And since you've hooked my brother, isn't he going to buy you your own home? Why do you need to stay in my family's house, Molly?" "Don't talk nonsense," my mom cut in as she approached. "Chloe, don't mind her." My mom even turned to comfort Chloe, then scolded me. "Is that any way to talk? Apologize to your brother and Chloe right now." I refused. Even though I knew I shouldn't have said that, I wasn't about to apologize in front of Chloe. Seeing my mom take her side, Chloe's expression grew even more smug. "It's okay, Auntie. Molly is just throwing a tantrum. William and I won't move out. We want to stay here with you so I can take care of you in your old age," Chloe said, her voice dripping with sweetness as she shot me a challenging look. My brother, ever the peacemaker, chimed in. "Don't blame Molly. Chloe was just joking about switching rooms. She didn't mean it seriously." He then turned to me, as if speaking to a child. "Your sister-in-law was just teasing you. Don't be mad, okay?" My mom, still charmed by Chloe, praised her for being so understanding while continuing to scold me for being petty, saying it was just a joke and reprimanding me for not being more tolerant. When I saw that they were seriously starting to plan the wedding, panic set in. I couldn't let this woman actually marry into our family. There was no way we could live with this drama queen. One day, when Chloe wasn't around, I called a family meeting with my parents and brother. "I don't agree with Chloe marrying into our family," I said bluntly. They all stared at me. My mom sighed. "Molly, don't cause trouble." My brother, however, didn't seem surprised. "As Chloe predicted, you're not on board with the marriage." "Great, she'd even predicted this." My brother's expression turned frustrated. "Why do you dislike Chloe so much? You've never given her a chance." When she told me, I didn't believe her, but here you are, proving her right. "You're still making things difficult for her," he continued, looking pained on her behalf. "Molly, can't you just give her a chance for my sake? If you really can't stand her, then after we get married, we'll move out. We won't live together. Will that make you happy?" It was clear that Chloe had already planted the seeds of doubt in his mind. Whatever I said now would sound like an excuse, all because I didn't like Chloe. She was playing the game too well. Realizing that no argument would work, I cut to the chase. I pulled out my phone and showed them the chat records between Chloe and her girlfriends.